everybody, we're back, and as usual, we're in big trouble again. This comic will help you to get up to speed on our story so far. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about Captain Underpants. Once there was two super awesome kids named George and Harold. We rocked a house, son. Me too. But they had a mean principal named Mr. Krupp. Blah-bitty blah blah blah. Mr. Krupp tried to blackmail George and Harold. I got you now. Video evidence. So George and Harold hypnotized him. I don't think so. They made him think he was Captain Underpants. It was funny at first, but then he took things a little too far. Tra-la-la, hey, come back! He got into all sorts of trouble. Then one day he drank some alien superpower juice, and he got real superpowers, which got him into even more trouble. Now, whenever Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, he turns into Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la! And whenever anybody pours water on Captain Underpants' head, he turns back into mean old Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah. One time the talking toilets attacked. Yum, yum. Eat 'em up. Their leader was the Turbo Toilet 2000. George and Harold used a weird machine to make a good robot called the Robo-Plunger. The Robo-Plunger beated up the Turbo Toilet 2000 and flew him to Uranus. There they have stayed for many months. This other time, Wedgie Woman made two robots. One of them kicked a kickball into outer space. Could these two events be connected? Our heroes are about to find out, because at this very moment, they are traveling backwards in time to discover the terrible truth. Oh no! Here we go again! Chapter 1, George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. If you're confused by what's going on here, don't worry, they're confused too. You see, George, Harold, and Captain Underpants had just undergone an epic adventure that started out in the dinosaur age and ended at their school, 40 years in the future. Now, thanks to Melvin Sneedly, the tattletale genius, and his glow-in-the-dark time-traveling robo-squid suit, they were all hurtling backwards in time, back a long, long, long time ago to that dull, old-fashioned age known as the present. Oh, I almost forgot. Traveling with them were 3 purple and orange speckled eggs laid by their pet pterodactyl Crackers, who, along with their other pet, Sulu the bionic hamster, had just saved the planet and created all life as we know it, simultaneously. See, that wasn't confusing at all, was it? Melvin's glow-in-the-dark, time-traveling robo-squid suit whizzed through time in a dazzling array of electrified eye candy as 40 years sped by in reverse. Then everything stopped suddenly. George and Harold looked around. Hey, said Harold, we'll stay here at school. Correct, said Melvin, only it's now 40 years and 1 day earlier. Hey, look, said George, pointing at the school. There's Tippy and his robo-pants. Not again, Harold moaned. Relax, said Melvin, as a flash of green light shot out of the library window. You're looking at something that happened yesterday, remember? Oh, yeah, said Harold. We were up there in the library. We just disappeared in the purple potty. Right, said George, and Tippy is just about to come after us. He should be leaving any second now. Suddenly, a crackling blue light shot out of the robo-pants, and before you could say convoluted plot line, it disappeared into the noontime haze. Okay, said Melvin, here you are, home again, jiggity jig. Take your precious eggs and go about your business. Wait a second, said George. Aren't the cops still after us? Yeah, said Harold. Don't they still think we stole that money from the bank? Not anymore, said Melvin proudly, patting himself on the back with one of his mechanical tentacles. Luckily, I had this glow-in-the-dark time-traveling robo-squid suit in my garage. I used it to go back in time and hack into the bank's computer." "What for?" asked Harold. "No big deal," said Melvin. I altered their surveillance images a little bit. Just don't grow a mustache or a beard anytime soon, and you guys will be fine." "Wow," said Harold. "Melvins neatly rescued us. I can't believe it." "Yeah, I don't get it, Melvin," said George suspiciously. "You've always hated us. How come you're being so nice to us all of a sudden?" "Oh, I have my reasons," said Melvin. "I have my reasons." And Melvin did indeed have reasons. 1 whole year's worth of reasons. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2. Don't you hate it when a kickball hits Uranus? Somewhere in the deepest, darkest reaches of our solar system, a red rubber kickball was swimming through space. None of Earth's top scientists could explain where it had come from, or why it was racing toward Uranus, but it had been on its present course for the past 5.5 books, and nothing could stop it. The kickball sped closer and closer to a small cluster of porcelain monstrosities that lay together in a heap on the surface of the icy, ridiculously named planet. Behind them, guarding them all with a keen, observant eye, was a robotic sentinel known as the Incredible Robo-Plunger. Faster and faster, the kickball whizzed toward them until finally, kabloink! The force of the red rubber ball knocked the head right off the Incredible Robo-Plunger. The decapitated defender jutted forward slightly as the photoatomic transmgobulating ectofran triplutonic zanziptimistic juice drizzled out from its mangled neck hole and oozed slowly downward into the gaping mouth of the Turbo Toilet 2000. This was unfortunate, because as any robotics engineer will tell you, it's very important to keep photoatomic transmgobulating ectofan triplutonic zanzamistic juice as far away from evil robots as possible. You certainly don't want to get even a drop of it in their mouths, for it will only make them come to life and give them unquenchable appetite for destruction, which, sadly, is exactly what happened on that bleak night on the terribly gassy surface of Uranus. The Turbo Toilet 2000's bulbous, bloodshot eyes smacked open and wobbled around wildly. His massive left arm creaked up and rubbed the painful, throbbing side of his porcelain lid. "Where the heck am I?" he said, looking around his fallen allies. Clumsily, he squeaked to his feet, dusted himself off, and beheld the headless mess that once was the Incredible Robo-Plunger. Then it all came back to him. The battle, the defeat, the humiliation. It wasn't long before the Turbo Toilet 2000 had pieced together every single event that brought him and his army of talking toilets to this frozen, frustrating fate. "I must retaliate," he said, clenching his razor-sharp porcelain teeth together tightly. "I must avenge my fallen allies." Luckily for him, he was a robot, which meant that he knew a thing or two about mechanical engineering. It didn't take long for him to disassemble the Robo-Plunger, rearrange the pieces, and create a flying rocket scooter from the recycled parts of his archenemy. The only thing left to do was travel the long journey from Uranus to Earth. It was a voyage that would take him nearly 3 whole pages to complete. And when he arrived, he would wage a war against the good people of Earth, a war that would threaten the very foundation of our planet. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 3. Melvin's Moment of Mirth. Remember back in Chapter 1 where we found out that Melvin had a whole year's worth of reasons why he needed to bring George and Harold and Captain Underpants back to the present? Well, in case you're wondering what happened during that year, here's what happened during that year. Immediately after our heroes disappeared on their prehistoric journey, the cops started looking for George, Harold, and Mr. Crop. Wanted posters appeared in post offices across America. But since George and Harold and Mr. Crop had traveled back in time to the Cretaceous period, they were nowhere to be found. Everyone Everyone assumed that George, Harold, and Mr. Krupp had robbed a bank and were hiding out in Canada or Mexico somewhere, and it wasn't too long before the cops gave up and stopped looking for them. This was sad news for most of the residents of Pequot, Ohio, but not for Melvin Sneedley. Melvin was finally happy for the first time in years. No George and no Harold meant no pranks, no comics, and best of all, no interruptions. Melvin could finally go about conducting his scientific experiments, creating wild new inventions, and indulging his beautiful mind at peace. But all that happiness only lasted for about 2 weeks because, as we mentioned earlier, you know who showed up. Chapter 4, He Who Must Not Be Flushed. The Turbo Toilet 2000 entered Earth's atmosphere in a blazing fireball from the sky. His rocket scooter roared over the rooftops of the small Ohio town as the porcelain predator bellowed out an eardrum-crushing taunt. "Here's Johnny!" Then came the destruction. Buildings collapsed. City buses were thrown through skyscraper windows. Fires raged out of control. The chaos and devastation crippled the town, sent residents running for their lives, and annoyed the heck out of one little boy. Melvin Sneedley had been trying to get some work done in his bedroom laboratory when the attack began. All he needed was 1 or 2 more hours of interrupted silence to complete his experiment. But the terrible ruckus outside was really getting on his nerves. Melvin marched over to his bedroom window, poked his head out, and shouted, "Hey, I'm trying to work, you idiot! Be quiet!" As you can probably imagine, the Turbo Toilet 2000 didn't take too kindly to being dressed down in such a manner. He swiveled his massive bowl around quickly and glared at Melvin with raging, hard-boiled eyeballs. "Uh-oh," Melvin gulped. Suddenly, the Turbo Toilet 2000 leaped at Melvin. The tiny tattletale screamed as a malevolent miscreant chased him down the street, across the city, and into the empty, darkened hallways of Jerome Horwitz Elementary School. Melvin ran upstairs and hid under Mr. Krupp's desk while the Turbo Toilet 2000 searched through the classrooms for him. Melvin was in deep trouble. Finally, he actually needed Captain Underpants' help, but the waistband warrior was nowhere to be found. "Rats," said Melvin, "if only I could—" Ouch! Melvin's knee was pressing down into something sharp. Carefully, Melvin reached down and pulled the pointy little object out of his knee. It was a toenail. Not just any toenail either. It was one of Mr. Krupp's thick, greasy yellow toenails that he had clipped off the day before he'd been whisked away on his journey back through time. "Ew, what a slob," said Melvin as he flicked the toenail away. Then Melvin thought of something. He knew that Mr. Krupp was also Captain Underpants. That meant that Mr. Krupp's DNA must have some kind of superpowered element in its makeup. If Melvin could find a way to extract the superpowered element from Mr. Krupp's DNA, Melvin could, theoretically, transfer those superpowers to himself. "Where's that toenail?" cried Melvin. Chapter 5, Big Melvin Returns. The Turbo Toilet 2000 noisily smashed his way from classroom to classroom, getting closer to Mr. Krupp's office with each thundering foot stomp. Melvin desperately searched the mangy orange carpet for Mr. Krupp's stinky toenail, digging his fingers into matted shag as the sounds of carnage got louder and louder. "Where's that toenail?" Melvin screamed. Finally, Mr. Krupp's office door burst open. "Aha!" shouted the Turbo Toilet 2000. "I got you now, you annoying little brat!" He reached down, grabbed Melvin by the foot, and pulled him toward his chomping razor-sharp teeth. "No!" screamed Melvin. "I'm too gifted to die! I'm too talented! I'm too— Ouch!" Once again, Mr. Krupp's stinky toenail had lodged its way into Melvin's pasty, freckled skin, but this time Melvin couldn't have been more happier about it. Quickly, he reached back, untied his shoe, and slipped his foot out. Then, Melvin jumped out of Mr. Krupp's window and slid down the flagpole, with the Turbo Toilet 2000 in hot pursuit. Fortunately, Melvin's little scientist wristwatch had built-in DNA extractor. Melvin inserted the filthy toenail into his watch and programmed a complete extraction procedure while the Turbo Toilet 2000 chased him back through town. As Melvin ran screaming, his watch quickly pulverized and sonicated the toenail cells, removed the membrane lipids, proteins, and RNA, and purified and isolated a single strand of Mr. Krupp's DNA. When Melvin reached his bedroom laboratory, he quickly fed the results into his mecha computer, which identified the metallo-organic superpowered substance and began replicating it in his saline gel solution. The gel percolated slowly as it oozed into a glass beaker. "Hurry up, you dumb, semi-conservative genome replication device!" shouted Melvin as the Turbo Toilet 2000 crashed through his bedroom wall. "Gotcha!" roared the loathsome lavatory. He scooped Melvin into his gigantic fist as his wet, leathery tongue slid back and forth against his pointed premolars. With one final desperate thrust, Melvin grabbed the beaker and chugged down its green, glowing contents. The Turbo Toilet 2000 popped Melvin into his mouth like a cocktail weenie and started to chew. His ferocious fangs chomped feverishly, but Melvin was tough and hard and surprisingly gristly. Then the Turbo Toilet 2000 struggled to swallow, a task he found nearly impossible. With his gigantic metal fingers, he reached into his bowl and pulled out a mucus-covered little boy, who, surprisingly, didn't have a scratch on him. The Turbo Toilet 2000 gawked at Melvin in dumbfounded astonishment. "You're so immature," said Melvin. Chapter 6. Sanitize for your protection. Unfortunately, the epic fight that followed was way too violent and disturbing to appear in a children's book. The images and descriptions would just be too terrifying. You'd have nightmares for weeks, trust me. So I invited a guest illustrator, Timmy Swanson, age 4, to draw the action in a style that won't depict too much graphic detail. I've also asked his Nana, Gertrude, age 71, to describe the scene in her own gentle vocabulary. Take it away, Timmy and Anna, today's special guests. "Thank you, dear. Well, let's see what's happening here. What? Oh my, that's horrible. It looks like a little boy is, oh dear. Now what's he doing? Oh dear me, this certainly is not appropriate at all. And now there's a robot shaped like a, well, I'd rather not say. He's doing just such dreadful things, though. And oh my, say, what kind of a book is this? Oh, for heaven's sake, this is ridiculous. I've never been so offended at all my... Oh, I've just seen about enough. Oh, okay, dear. Timmy, stop drawing. Stop drawing this instant. No, Timmy, no. Chapter 7, The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter Part 1 in Flip-O-Rama, featuring Amy and Timmy. I've had enough of this insanity. Shame on you all. It's okay, Nana. Just a few more flip pages and it'll all be over. Oh, dear! Oh, my! Oh, for goodness sake! Chapter 8, Everybody Loves Melvin. When it was all over, the Turbo Toilet 2000 was dead, and Melvin Sneedly was a hero. The mayor had a big parade in honor of Melvin. Weird Al Yankovic wrote a song about him. Even the vice president sent a letter of congratulations. Melvin Sneedly was known throughout the world as the little superpowered tattletale who saved the world. Finally, said Melvin, I'm getting the respect I deserve. Chapter 9, With a great power comes a great big pain in the hiney. Melvin enjoyed being a superhero. At first, it was fun stopping runaway trains, rescuing lost children, and saving people from burning buildings. Whenever anybody needed help, all they had to do was lift their heads to the sky and cry out, Yo, Big Melvin! And Melvin would drop whatever he was doing and zip to the scene and save the day. It was all good at first, until it started to get bad. You see, after a while, people started to abuse the system. They started crying out, "Yo, Big Melvin," all the time, and it got old pretty quickly. Melvin would drop everything, throw on his cape, fly out the window, zip through a city, and arrive at the scene, only to find out that it wasn't an emergency at all. Usually it was just someone who had misplaced their cell phone, or a kid who needed help with a video game cheat code, or some guy who accidentally dropped his wallet in the toilet. It was a complete waste of Melvin's time, and the interruptions were beginning to drive him crazy. But the final straw came one evening as Melvin was doing a synchrotron radiation experiment with his homemade oscillating field particle accelerator. 11 months of research were finally about to pay off. The klystrons and electromagnets began to accelerate the hadrons faster and faster through Melvin's homemade copper cyclone tubing. Soon, Melvin would be the first person on Earth to definitely prove the Higgs boson's existence and solve the mystery of everything. But then, with his supersonic eardrums, Melvin heard a cry for help from across the city. Quickly, Melvin shut down his experiment, which caused the particle accelerator to overheat. The resulting explosion blew a hole in his bedroom floor 33 deep. But Melvin didn't care. Somewhere in the city, a citizen needed his help. So he grabbed his smoldering cape from the pile of ashes that used to be his bedroom closet and flew to the scene of the emergency. When he arrived, he found a middle-aged woman screaming frantically out her apartment window. "Yo, Big Melvin, help! Help! It's an emergency!" "What's wrong?" Melvin asked desperately. "Do these pants make me look fat?" asked the lady.